Yesterday, September 10, 2025, the conservative Christian activist Charlie Kirk was assassinated at a public event. The shooting occurred during the American Comeback Tour event in front of approximately 3,000 people. Kirk was answering a question about mass shootings when he was hit. Footage from the moment shows a chaotic and bloody scene. The FBI is investigating the crime. A suspect was detained at the scene but later released. Kirk was the founder and CEO of Turning Point USA, an influential conservative youth organization, and the host of the popular podcast The Charlie Kirk Show. He is survived by his wife and 2 young children. United States President Donald Trump reacted to his assassination on social media, blaming the radical left, whom he accuses of violent rhetoric that led to Kirk's murder. Charlie Kirk was married to Erica Francois, a former Miss Arizona and ministry leader. They had 2 young children. Erica described him as brave when the world demands silence. What did Charlie Kirk think, and why is his assassination an ideological crime? Beyond his political ideas, Kirk was a devout Christian who did not hide his faith. He argued that God is in America's DNA and that inalienable rights come from the Creator, not the government. In his talks, he called for prayer for the country, citing the Bible. He believed that the best thing one could do for the United States was to cry out to God. He quoted the Bible to teach that national healing comes from God, not from secular policies. He also believed in the influence of Christianity and God in society, since without God, one can only expect a progressive deterioration of the family, customs, justice, and freedoms. God was at the center of his thinking as a believer in the Bible. Regarding freedom, Kirk believed in the right to bear arms, religious freedom, freedom of speech, and the Fourth Amendment. He believed in the dignity of the individual as someone made in the image of God and believed that freedom is not a gift given by the state, but a gift from God to the individual. As for the government, he believed it was nothing more than a dictatorship of bureaucrats and that excessive regulation is nothing more than a way to annihilate freedoms and create an oppressive super-state, and that the government's policies against crime were too soft and understanding toward criminals. He said, "The most compassionate thing we can do with a criminal is lock them up, not release them." Which makes us think of the violent stabbing murder of a Ukrainian refugee on a bus, carried out by a repeat offender. Regarding Islam, the American commentator Kirk never hid his openly critical stance toward Islam, which he did not understand solely as a religion, but as a political ideology with aspirations of conquest. In his interventions, he warns that, beyond the personal faith of millions of peaceful Muslims, there exists a political project that he considers incompatible with the values of the West. For Kirk, Islam is not limited to the spiritual realm. He said, "Islam is, fundamentally, a political ideology that seeks to conquer us, whether militarily or demographically." With this phrase, he denounces what he perceives as an advance of Islamic influence in Europe and the United States, not only through the violence of groups like Hamas or ISIS, but also through demographic and cultural means. From his perspective, while Christian nationalism is criticized as an internal threat, the expansion of imams and Islamic leaders who, in his view, represent a real risk is ignored. His style is not subtle. He went so far as to state, "Islam is the sword that the left is using to behead America." The sentence, full of drama, reflects how he interprets the alliance between progressive sectors and Muslim communities as a strategic movement against Western identity. Kirk distinguishes between moderate and fundamentalist Muslims but warns that those who strive hardest to live according to the Quran do so following precepts that he describes as cruel. The people who try hardest to live by the rules of Islam are not good people, because those rules are evil and cruel. Muhammad himself established rules for sex slaves and the slave trade. According to his view, the atrocities committed by jihadist organizations are not a distortion of the faith, but the most faithful application of Muhammad's teachings. At the same time, he acknowledges the existence of decent Muslims but concludes that they are so to the extent that they do not practice Islam literally, thus becoming bad Muslims. Kirk's stance is undoubtedly controversial and provocative. His words generate rejection and applause in equal measure. But in his insistence lies a clear warning. For him, the West underestimates an ideological challenge that is not limited to bombs but also operates in migratory, political, and cultural dynamics. As for Kirk's thoughts on transgenderism, Kirk's stance on transgenderism is as harsh as the one he holds toward political Islam. For him, it is not a matter of civil rights, but a harmful ideology that especially affects women and children. He describes it as a fetish turned into a political agenda and as medical abuse rather than a legitimate expression of identity. Kirk insists that transgenderism should not be equated with the fight for civil rights. Transgenderism is not a legitimate civil rights issue. There is no civil right to be a pervert who gets off on pretending to be a teenage girl. Let's go back to the old way of thinking. On International Women's Day, he took the opportunity to emphasize his defense of real women against what he calls the trans invasion of female spaces. According to his view, there is no right to impose delusions or harass in bathrooms and locker rooms, and the urgent need is to return to the sanity of the pre-woke era. Regarding hormonal treatments for minors, Kirk went further by endorsing a British report that questioned these practices. For him, it is not medicine, but disguised child abuse. This movement has always been about predators trying to expand their fetish. The accusation is direct: those who promote gender affirmation in children do not seek to protect, but to exploit. On his show, he quoted James Lindsay to reinforce his stance. "There are men, there are women. You cannot become the other. This is a very simple truth. This is the greatest child abuse and medical scandal since the Nazis." Kirk amplified those words to emphasize what, in his opinion, constitutes the greatest modern medical scandal. In his narrative, gender is not interchangeable, and attempts to affirm it constitute a profound violation of biological truth and an attack on the most vulnerable. Kirk's assassination adds to a long list of attacks and assassinations carried out against conservative politicians, starting with Donald Trump himself, and followed by Álvaro Uribe, Bolsonaro, Shinzo Abe, and José María Aznar. While there are nuances in each attack, it is striking that the victim rhetoric of the radical left ends up inciting hatred and aggression, while they remain completely unharmed. Freedom of speech has died in our supposedly democratic societies. The hate campaigns carried out against anyone who dares to challenge current dogmas have consequences. Nowadays, declaring oneself a Christian, a defender of the family, a defender of individual freedoms has consequences. If a public figure questions abortion, Islam, border defense, the issue of transgenderism, and the woke ideological agenda, they will suffer all kinds of reprisals, starting with a wave of hatred on social media, and continuing with economic consequences, job loss, and ending with violent attacks. We are facing a hyperdogmatic, fanatical, and relentless society in defending a single discourse, and anyone who has the courage to question this kind of woke religion will be crushed, as we have sadly seen with Kirk's assassination. The problem is the discourse of the radical left, which justifies any violent action. When someone is dehumanized by reducing them to a label, any act is justified. Often, leftists call anyone who does not think like them far-right, justifying the deprivation of their freedom of speech, their fundamental rights, and finally, if their life is attacked, they will end up saying it is the victim's responsibility, not the aggressor's. This way of thinking is extremely dangerous and has been preached for decades on university campuses, in the media, and in film. We are experiencing severe polarization, and the responsibility does not lie with those who think differently, but with those who use victim language and launch hate campaigns. Nowadays, woke dogmas cannot be questioned. And since the attack on Donald Trump, radicals, supported by some sectors of the moderate left, have dared to cross the line into aggression. What will happen from now on? Despite the shootings against Christian schools, as seen a few weeks ago, if the conservative, Christian, and libertarian sector reacts with similar aggression, it will be amplified to justify more violent reactions. We cannot allow something like that. Despite the rage and injustice committed against a peaceful thinker and a shattered family, we cannot respond with violence. The assassination of Charlie Kirk is a violent way to silence one of the most eloquent voices of thought in favor of freedom. The radical left, pro-Islam, atheist, and in favor of a trans agenda, will not allow eloquent communicators to silence and leave argumentless leftist fanatics full of hate. A new wave of thought is recovering old extreme socialist ideals. The state, an all-powerful entity, must have more power, and of course, the state must be composed of those who seek to control the lives of families, religion, and children. This is not about ideology, but about power. However, the real battle is spiritual in nature. We cannot hide that God is at the center of everything, and specifically the Christian worldview. This is a battle between the state and God, between Christianity and Islam, between cultural Marxism and Christianity. The leftist fanatics are willing to progressively replace the population with large masses of migrants fleeing repressive Islamic societies, but who at the same time wish to transform the West into a caliphate governed by Islamic law. It is a suicidal war in which trans activists are willing to commit suicide to eradicate Christianity. This illogical way of thinking only makes sense if we consider that it is a spiritual war that obeys an anti-Christian and anti-church agenda. The replacement theory has been accused of being a conspiracy theory. In fact, even today the media calls it a conspiracy, but it is enough to walk through various cities in Europe to see that entire cities have been replaced in their population, and that, for example, the number of Muslim mayors in the United Kingdom continues to grow. The situation is not going to improve, the violence has only just begun. School and church shootings will increase in the United States, and the desecration of churches and murders of priests and Christian leaders will continue in Europe. The elimination of synagogues and Judaism in Europe is a fact. In Europe, synagogues have police protection, or in many cases are unmarked buildings so that radicals do not attack them. The violence will continue, the state will keep accumulating power, and our only refuge is and will be God, the traditional family, and personal support networks. This should not intimidate us but strengthen us. The defense of freedom is a just cause. The defense of the Christian worldview and a society influenced by Christian principles have created the freest societies most respectful of individual liberty. Let us follow the advice of the late Charles Kirk, let us pray, cry out to God, and ask Him to heal us from the hatred that is growing. It is a time for courage, for taking on great sacrifices and personal risks, and for combating this evil ideology through respectful and brave debate, confronting with arguments the barbarism they want to impose on us. Our thoughts are with the Kirk family. May God bring comfort in these devastating times.